Would you betray the memory of your own mother for the sake of a brand? For Meghan Markle, according to the whispers and leaks that have recently shaken Hollywood and royal circles alike, that question is no longer hypothetical. It is allegedly real. In what could be described as one of the most audacious moves in recent royal history, Meghan reportedly sought to trademark the name Princess Diana for her own luxury fashion line. And the reaction from Prince Harry was explosive, to say the least. Within hours of discovering what she allegedly had in motion, Harry was gone. Montecito, once a sanctuary for the couple, became an empty stage, the tension so palpable you could almost see it in the air. But what led to this dramatic fallout? And why is it capturing headlines and social media feeds around the world? This story is far from simple. It is a tangled web of legacy, ambition, betrayal, and emotions so raw they could cut through steel. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Montecito, California, has long been synonymous with privacy and luxury. Nestled against the Pacific Ocean, the estate offers sweeping views, high walls, manicured gardens, and a sense of security few can match. To outsiders, it looked like the perfect retreat for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle after their step back from royal duties. For them, it was supposed to be a haven, a place to escape the relentless scrutiny of London tabloids, intrusive paparazzi, and the constant swirl of royal protocol. But even in paradise, storms have a way of brewing unnoticed. The alleged trademark attempt is more than a legal maneuver. It strikes at the very heart of what Prince Harry holds dear. Princess Diana was not just a mother. She was a symbol, an icon of compassion, vulnerability, and defiance against the rigid expectations of royalty. Her name carries weight, reverence, and a legacy that has endured decades after her tragic death. To consider using it as the label for a fashion brand is, according to insiders, not just controversial, it is deeply personal. Imagine the emotional shock of discovering that someone you love, someone you trusted, might be commodifying your mother's memory. It is a betrayal that cuts to the core of identity, loyalty, and family honor. Harry's relationship with his mother was, by all accounts, incredibly close. He has spoken often about the lessons she taught him, the love she shared, and the values she instilled. Her untimely death left a permanent mark on him, shaping both his public persona and his private life. It is perhaps this profound connection that fueled his fury when he allegedly learned of Meghan's plans. Sources close to the couple describe Harry as absolutely devastated, furious, and completely blindsided. Words that are strong in themselves, but in the context of Harry's known calm and measured public demeanor, they suggest a level of emotional upheaval rarely seen. The timing of this alleged move is also significant. Meghan has long been focused on expanding her brand, stepping further into the world of luxury fashion, wellness, and lifestyle products. To the public, it might appear as a savvy business move. After all, celebrity-endorsed brands and personal labels are not uncommon in Hollywood. But this particular move, using the name of Harry's late mother, is loaded with moral, emotional, and symbolic implications. And it is precisely that tension, business ambition versus family loyalty, that drives the drama at the heart of this story. When Harry discovered what was allegedly happening, the reaction was immediate. Sources describe him as confronting Meghan, his voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "How could you even think of doing this?" he reportedly asked. "This is my mother. You can't just turn her into a brand." The argument that followed was intense, private, yet so emotionally charged that it reportedly reverberated through every corner of the Montecito estate. Friends who later spoke on condition of anonymity described the scene as electric with tension, a rare glimpse into the raw vulnerability of a man who has spent most of his life under constant public scrutiny. For days, whispers of this betrayal circulated among staff, neighbors, and close friends. Many were stunned, questioning whether such an act could really happen. Could someone truly be that ambitious, that detached from the emotional bonds of marriage and family? Harry's absence from Montecito became the talk of the town, with neighbors reporting an unusual quietness around the estate. Where previously there had been the sound of daily life, laughter, and the soft hum of luxury living, now there was only silence. The prince, reportedly unable to process the betrayal, had left, without fanfare, without announcement, and most importantly, without a clear path forward. Media outlets were quick to pick up on the story, amplifying every rumor and insider claim. Social media platforms erupted, with hashtags trending and celebrity commentators weighing in. The narrative was sensational. A prince, blindsided by what he perceived as an outrageous act of disrespect towards his mother, leaving the estate that symbolized his sanctuary. It is a story that has it all: love, betrayal, family loyalty, ambition, and scandal. But beyond the headlines and viral posts, the human element is what truly captivates. How does someone navigate a world where trust is broken so publicly? How does a man reconcile grief with anger, personal betrayal with public scrutiny? These are questions that the world watches unfold, fascinated, horrified, and unable to look away. What makes this story particularly gripping is the layering of details that emerged over time. According to multiple sources, Meghan's alleged trademark attempt wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. It had been in development for months. Documents were reportedly drafted, business strategies considered, and legal consultations conducted. The level of planning, combined with the emotional weight of the act, adds complexity to the narrative. It is not merely a clash of personalities. It is a collision of legacies, ambitions, and values. For Harry, it is a betrayal that touches every aspect of his identity: son, husband, and guardian of his mother's memory. And yet, as dramatic as this all seems, the story is far from over. Details continue to emerge about Harry's movements after leaving Montecito, Meghan's responses, both public and behind the scenes, and the broader ripple effects on their circle of friends, family, and even the business world. There are questions about legal consequences, public perception, and the long-term ramifications for both Harry and Meghan's careers. Each layer adds new tension, new stakes, and new emotional beats that the audience cannot ignore. It is important to remember that this is not just a story about royalty or celebrity culture. It is a story about human emotion, the fragility of trust, and the consequences of choices. How do you balance personal ambition with respect for family? How far can someone push boundaries before relationships fracture irreparably? These are the moral and emotional dilemmas that lie at the core of this narrative. And it is precisely this universal relatability, combined with the extraordinary circumstances, that keeps audiences glued to the unfolding saga. As we delve deeper into the events surrounding Montecito, Meghan Markle's alleged betrayal, and Prince Harry's dramatic exit, you will uncover a story rich with tension, emotion, and shocking revelations. Each chapter will reveal new layers, some previously unknown to the public, others hidden in plain sight, waiting for scrutiny. From the opulent halls of the estate to the whispered conversations that have never been aired, the narrative builds like a thriller, each beat more compelling than the last. And yet, the most shocking aspect may not be the alleged betrayal itself. It may be the choices made in its aftermath, the decisions Harry has taken, and the unseen consequences that continue to ripple outward. What does this mean for their relationship? For Harry's connection to his mother's legacy? For Meghan's ambitions and public image? These questions linger like a shadow over Montecito, unanswered, unresolved, and all the more tantalizing for it. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. No one expected peace to last in Montecito. On the surface, the estate appeared like a sanctuary, a sun-drenched paradise along the Pacific coast where the ocean's rhythm lulled even the busiest minds into a false sense of serenity. To outsiders, the sprawling gardens, pristine driveways, and high stone walls signaled privacy and luxury, a life removed from paparazzi lenses and tabloid scrutiny. But within those walls, the air was charged with tension, subtle but persistent, the kind you feel in your chest before a storm hits. And in the case of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, that storm was brewing silently for months. The couple had moved to Montecito with dreams of a new beginning. Gone were the suffocating protocols of royal life, the constant media glare, and the endless obligations that came with being part of the monarchy. Here, they could live freely, or so it seemed. Harry, weary from years of navigating palace politics and public expectation, craved stability, quiet, and a sense of control over his own narrative. Meghan, ambitious, charismatic, and media-savvy, envisioned a life that balanced privacy with a powerful public brand. It was a delicate equilibrium, one that required mutual trust, understanding, and the occasional compromise. At first, Montecito offered that balance. Friends reported seeing Harry stroll along the manicured paths at dawn, a rare moment of reflection, coffee in hand, the ocean breeze cooling his skin. Meghan, meanwhile, immersed herself in her projects, charity initiatives, interviews, and discussions about expanding her influence into fashion and lifestyle. They appeared to outsiders as a picture of domestic bliss, laughter echoing through hallways, soft chatter at dinner, and the occasional glimmer of playful teasing between the two. It looked, from a distance, like a couple fully settled into their new life. But appearances are deceptive. Beneath the veneer of calm, subtle signs of tension were emerging. Sources close to the couple hinted at disagreements over business decisions, public appearances, and the handling of Harry's late mother's legacy. Small arguments, once quickly resolved, began to linger. Conversations became transactional, dominated by schedules, contracts, and branding decisions rather than emotional connection. Friends noticed that Harry's smiles were more restrained, his usual warmth tinged with fatigue. Meghan's laughter, while genuine, carried a sharper edge, a drive that often left those around her feeling both inspired and uneasy. The alleged trademark of Princess Diana's name, though not yet public knowledge, had been quietly simmering as a point of contention. In the months leading up to its discovery, Meghan reportedly consulted with attorneys, branding experts, and advisors, exploring the possibility of creating a luxury fashion line under the name that carried such immense emotional weight. It wasn't a casual idea, it was meticulously planned, every legal nuance considered, every potential reaction analyzed. From a business perspective, it might have seemed like a savvy move. From a personal and familial perspective, it was incendiary. Harry's relationship with his mother was deeply formative. Princess Diana was not only a loving parent, but a moral compass and emotional anchor in his life. Her tragic death left a wound that never fully healed. To see her name allegedly used for commercial gain, potentially without his consent or knowledge, struck at the heart of Harry's loyalty and love for her. It was more than disrespect. It was a betrayal of trust, the kind that leaves a person questioning everything they thought they knew about their closest confidant. In those days leading up to the revelation, Montecito seemed ordinary, almost deceptively mundane. Harry would host small gatherings for friends, engage in casual conversations with staff, and immerse himself in charitable projects. Meghan, focused on her brand and media presence, would discuss strategic partnerships, fashion opportunities, and lifestyle campaigns. The estate hummed with activity, a quiet energy masking the tensions that would soon erupt. Every smile, every handshake, every shared moment carried with it the potential for misinterpretation, the delicate dance of maintaining appearances while internal storms brewed. And then came the moment that shattered the fragile equilibrium. Sources suggest it began as a seemingly innocuous email, a legal notice, or perhaps a draft document circulating among advisors. Harry, known for his measured demeanor and capacity to maintain composure under pressure, reportedly reacted instantly, a surge of disbelief and anger washing over him. The reality he faced was almost too much to comprehend. The name of his mother, the woman he loved and revered, potentially being used as a branding tool for a project that he viewed as opportunistic and disrespectful. The betrayal, he felt, was profound, cutting through layers of trust and affection that had been painstakingly built over years. What followed was a period of intense emotional turmoil. Harry, unable to reconcile the alleged act with his sense of familial loyalty, began to distance himself, physically and emotionally. Walks along the estate became longer, meals were eaten in silence, and conversations that once flowed easily now carried an undercurrent of tension. Staff members noticed the change. Doors closed more often, expressions tightened, and the usual laughter of the household was replaced by an uneasy quiet. Every movement, every glance, seemed to carry unspoken words of disappointment, frustration, and hurt. Meanwhile, Meghan, focused on her business ambitions, allegedly pressed forward with her plans, perhaps unaware of, or dismissive toward, the depth of Harry's reaction. Friends and insiders described a growing disconnect, a widening gap between Harry's emotional needs and Meghan's professional objectives. The estate, once a sanctuary, had become a stage for unspoken conflict, a place where private betrayal simmered behind closed doors. Each day added layers to the tension, every meeting, every discussion, reinforcing the sense that the calm of Montecito was an illusion, a fragile surface covering a turbulent undercurrent. The contrast between public perception and private reality could not have been more stark. Outside the estate, social media painted a picture of a glamorous life, a couple in love navigating the challenges of celebrity and royalty with grace. Yet behind those carefully curated images lay a story of strain, disappointment, and heartbreak. The juxtaposition was almost cinematic, the serene beauty of Montecito's coastline against the storm brewing inside the walls of the estate. Friends noted the irony, how a place designed for privacy could amplify the sense of emotional exposure, making every misstep feel magnified, every disagreement amplified by the knowledge that the world was watching, even if only in whispers and speculation. And then came the moment of decision. Harry, unable to bear the perceived betrayal, made a choice that would alter the trajectory of their lives. Sources suggest that he left the estate suddenly, without fanfare, without explanation to staff or friends. The quiet that followed was deafening. Where previously there had been movement, conversation, and the hum of domestic life, there was now silence, a void that mirrored the emotional chasm that had opened between him and Meghan. Montecito, for all its beauty and luxury, had become a place of absence, a stage set for questions without answers, for conflict unresolved. The consequences of that departure were immediate and far-reaching. Staff, friends, and neighbors speculated endlessly, unsure of what had triggered such a drastic move. The media quickly picked up on the story, with rumors and alleged insider accounts spreading across platforms, each version more sensational than the last. Social media erupted, fans and critics alike dissecting every detail, every possible motive, every perceived slight. The narrative was irresistible: a prince betrayed, a mother's legacy allegedly compromised, a sanctuary emptied of the one who most needed it. Yet even as headlines blared and speculation ran rampant, the deeper story remained hidden from public view. The emotional complexity, the private conversations, the unspoken fears and desires. These were elements that would only surface slowly, piece by piece, as insiders began to reveal fragments of the truth. And for audiences watching from around the world, the tension was palpable. Every revelation promised another layer of drama, another twist in a story already charged with intrigue, betrayal, and emotional intensity. What makes this chapter of Harry and Meghan's life so compelling is not just the alleged betrayal, but the human story at its core. It is a story of trust broken, of ambitions colliding with values, of love tested by decisions that reverberate far beyond the walls of Montecito. How do you navigate a world where the person you trust most is capable of acts you perceive as unforgivable? How do you reconcile grief, loyalty, and ambition when they collide so violently? These are not just questions for the royal family. They are questions that resonate with anyone who has ever faced betrayal or conflict in their closest relationships. As the stage is set, Montecito becomes more than just an estate. It is a symbol of dreams, of sanctuary, of ambition, and now, of rupture. The calm before the storm is over. Every decision, every conversation, every silent walk along the garden paths carries with it the weight of consequence. And the storm, as all those close to the couple would attest, is just beginning. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It wasn't just a rumor. It was a bombshell, one that, according to insiders, hit Prince Harry like a physical blow. The first whispers of Meghan Markle's alleged plan to trademark Princess Diana for a luxury fashion line began circulating quietly, carefully, almost like a rumor you'd tell in hushed tones. But quiet whispers have a way of growing, and in Montecito, those whispers became deafening, leaving Harry blindsided, enraged, and utterly disbelieving. Imagine this: the name of your late mother, the woman whose memory shapes every choice you make, suddenly being discussed as the label for someone else's personal gain. It's almost unthinkable. For Harry, this wasn't a matter of celebrity branding. It was a betrayal on the deepest personal level. Diana was more than a public figure. She was a mother, a moral compass, a guiding light whose legacy Harry has dedicated himself to protecting. The idea that her name could be commercialized without regard for its emotional and symbolic significance felt like a dagger in the heart. The rumor reportedly first reached Harry through trusted sources, friends and staff members who were uneasy about what they'd seen. Legal documents, unsigned but circulating among Meghan's advisors, hinted at a plan to leverage Diana's name for a luxury fashion line. Couture clothing, high-end accessories, perhaps even collaborations with elite designers. On paper, it might have seemed like a savvy business move, a way to cement a legacy in the competitive world of celebrity-driven fashion. In reality, to Harry, it was profoundly disrespectful. He reportedly referred to it as disgraceful and unforgivable, words heavy with emotion and disbelief. The timing of this revelation made it all the more devastating. Harry had spent years processing grief over his mother's death, navigating the emotional landscape of loss while trying to protect her memory from the relentless machinery of media sensationalism. For decades, the world has scrutinized Diana's image, her words, her style, and her relationships. Every interview, every appearance, every photograph has been dissected and monetized. But this alleged trademark, felt personal in a way that no media frenzy ever could. It was as if someone close to him had crossed an invisible line, turning private memory into a commercial commodity. Insiders described the moment Harry first processed the rumor as electric with tension. He reportedly confronted Meghan in private, demanding an explanation. The conversation, according to those familiar with it, was intense. Harry's voice was reportedly measured but laced with anger. "How could you even think of doing this? This is my mother. Her name isn't a business opportunity. It's sacred." Meghan's response, while calm, was allegedly firm, emphasizing strategic branding and the importance of legacy in her own way. It was a collision of values, ambition, and deeply personal beliefs, and the friction was immediate. What makes this scenario so compelling, so irresistible to public fascination, is the contrast between perception and reality. Outside Montecito, Meghan has cultivated an image of elegance, composure, and calculated decision-making. Harry, meanwhile, is viewed as a royal humanitarian, compassionate yet private, deeply tied to his mother's legacy. The clash here is almost Shakespearean. Two highly intelligent, driven individuals navigating ambition, emotion, and legacy in a world that scrutinizes their every move. The stakes aren't just personal. They are emblematic of the ongoing tension between private grief and public perception, between familial loyalty and personal ambition. As the rumor gained traction, insiders say that Montecito became an echo chamber of speculation and concern. Friends close to the couple were reportedly divided. Some urged Harry to see the business potential, framing it as a strategic move that could amplify Diana's legacy in the fashion world. Others encouraged him to confront the betrayal directly, to make it clear that this was not acceptable. Meanwhile, Harry, already emotionally taxed, reportedly began distancing himself, not physically at first, but emotionally, withdrawing from conversations that had once been natural and intimate. The estate's serene walls became witnesses to silence, avoidance, and tension that was impossible to ignore. Adding another layer of drama, social media speculation began leaking in subtle ways. Though the trademark had not been officially filed publicly, gossip blogs, insider tweets, and celebrity commentators began dissecting the story, analyzing every move, every comment, every possible motive. The narrative grew. Meghan, ambitious and calculating, allegedly leveraging a royal name for personal gain. Harry, loyal to his mother's memory, blindsided and enraged. The public's fascination exploded. Fans, critics, and the media alike debated morality, ethics, and legality. The question on everyone's mind: could this alleged betrayal be real? Harry's reaction, as described by sources, was immediate and decisive. He reportedly removed himself from the situation, leaving Montecito for a period of reflection, private meetings, and emotional recalibration. The estate, which had once been a sanctuary of calm and domestic routine, now felt hollow, an empty stage set against the Pacific horizon. Friends who visited during this period described an eerie quietness, a tension that lingered in every corridor, in every garden path. The calm, it seemed, had been shattered irrevocably. This chapter of the story is also about perception versus intention. Some sources close to Meghan argue that the alleged trademark was never meant to hurt Harry personally, that it was framed as a tribute to Diana, a celebration of her style and legacy through the lens of a luxury fashion line. But Harry's perspective, shaped by personal grief, deep love, and protective instincts, could not reconcile such logic with the emotional reality he faced. In this clash of perspectives, the story deepens, illustrating the complexity of human emotion when personal history, grief, and ambition intersect. Adding to the tension is the broader context of celebrity and royal branding. Names, images, and legacies have become commodities in modern culture. The intersection of fame, commerce, and legacy is fertile ground for conflict, especially when family history is involved. In this case, the alleged move to trademark Princess Diana's name wasn't just a business decision. It was an emotional lightning rod, capable of igniting deeply held fears, resentments, and insecurities. It was a decision that, intentionally or not, crossed a line that Harry was unprepared to accept. Sources describe the ensuing days as a period of intense reflection and private turmoil for Harry. He reportedly consulted trusted friends, advisors, and even family members, seeking perspective, validation, and support. Yet the more he processed the situation, the clearer it became. The alleged trademark was not just a minor misstep, it was a fundamental breach of trust, one that could not be ignored. The emotional stakes were high, the implications far-reaching, and the personal consequences profound. But what makes this story even more riveting is that it doesn't end with discovery. The aftermath, the decisions made in the wake of the alleged betrayal, and the ripple effects across Montecito, Hollywood, and the royal narrative are what elevate it from mere rumor to dramatic saga. Friends report that Harry's absence from the estate became more pronounced with each passing day. The silence around Montecito almost a character in itself, a symbol of fractured trust, unspoken anger, and the quiet weight of unresolved conflict. And as the rumor spread beyond the walls of Montecito, it became clear that this was not just a private family issue. It had public, social, and even commercial implications. Legal experts weighed in on the feasibility of trademarking a deceased public figure's name. Brand strategists debated whether such a move could enhance or tarnish Meghan's image. And the public? They were captivated, glued to screens, dissecting every leaked detail, every insider account, every whispered hint. It was a storm that grew in intensity, fueled by secrecy, speculation, and emotion. As the tension escalated, questions remained unanswered. Would Harry confront Meghan directly, or continue to distance himself? How far had the alleged trademark progressed? Could it be reversed, stopped, or mitigated? And perhaps most importantly, what did this mean for their relationship, their public image, and the legacy of Princess Diana herself? The stakes were enormous, the emotions raw, and the narrative unfolding in real time, each day bringing new layers of suspense and intrigue. The calm, once taken for granted, had evaporated entirely. Montecito was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a theater of emotional conflict, a battleground where legacy, love, ambition, and betrayal collided. And at the center of it all stood Harry, grappling with the shock of what he perceived as an unimaginable act, forced to make decisions that would reverberate across his personal life and the world stage. But what came next would change everything, and no one could have anticipated the twists, the reactions, or the consequences that were about to unfold. What exactly was Meghan planning? The question alone sent ripples through Montecito, through Harry's inner circle, and eventually across the media landscape, leaving everyone wondering just how far the alleged trademark attempt had progressed. It wasn't a casual idea whispered over coffee or a fleeting thought that disappeared into the ether. According to insiders, Meghan's alleged plan to use Princess Diana's name for a luxury fashion line was meticulously mapped out. Every legal nuance considered, every branding strategy evaluated, and every possible public reaction calculated. To understand the magnitude of this drama, it's important to unpack the mechanics of a trademark. Securing a trademark is more than just filing paperwork. It's a declaration of ownership, a signal to the world that a particular name or logo carries commercial rights. For celebrities and public figures, trademarks are a way to monetize influence, protect brand identity, and ensure legal control over how their name or likeness is used. But when that name belongs to a deceased public figure, especially someone as iconic and emotionally charged as Princess Diana, the stakes are entirely different. It's not just business. It's personal, symbolic, and in this case, potentially incendiary. According to sources familiar with Meghan's alleged strategy, the proposed fashion line was set to cover high-end couture clothing, accessories, and possibly even collaborations with elite designers. The plan, on paper, may have looked like a logical expansion of her existing brand portfolio. But to Harry, this was an emotional red line. He reportedly saw it as an act of commodification, taking his mother's name, her legacy, and turning it into a product, a business venture, and potentially a spectacle for profit. The tension here isn't merely legal. It's deeply emotional, touching on love, loyalty, and memory. Insiders describe the documents related to the alleged trademark as precise and professional. They included detailed plans for branding, market positioning, and long-term growth strategies. The names of attorneys and branding consultants appear, showing that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a calculated, carefully executed plan. And yet, for all its sophistication, it collided violently with the personal history and emotional stakes of Harry's world. This wasn't about markets, logos, or revenue projections. It was about the woman who shaped Harry's life, whose memory he has vowed to protect at all costs. Harry's reaction, according to those close to him, was immediate and visceral. Friends say he couldn't believe what he was seeing, that his sense of disbelief quickly morphed into rage and heartbreak. "It's one thing to build a brand," he reportedly said to Confidants, "but it's another to use my mother's name as a label for personal gain. That's unforgivable." The emotional weight of these words underscores the intensity of the perceived betrayal. To Harry, this was not just a professional misstep. It was a violation of trust and a desecration of memory. The alleged plan also raised questions about consent, legacy, and authority. Would Harry have been consulted if the idea had gone public? Could he have vetoed it? And beyond the legalities, what about the ethical and emotional implications? Friends and advisors speculate that Harry's fury stemmed not only from the idea itself, but from the lack of communication. It wasn't simply that Meghan wanted to trademark Diana's name. It was that he discovered it secondhand, through documents, whispers, and confidential leaks, rather than through a direct conversation. That sense of exclusion, of being blindsided, amplified the betrayal. Public perception added another layer of complexity. Celebrity branding is scrutinized intensely, and the alleged move to trademark Diana's name carried enormous PR risks. Diana's legacy is sacred in the eyes of the public, and any perceived exploitation could provoke backlash not just against Meghan, but against Harry as well. This was more than a family dispute. It was a potential media firestorm. Friends and insiders reportedly warned that such a move could ignite social media outrage, celebrity commentary, and global debate about morality, legacy, and exploitation. And in this high-stakes environment, Harry's emotions became even more charged. The story also delves into the psychology of ambition versus loyalty. Meghan, ambitious and driven, allegedly saw the proposed line as a way to honor Diana while simultaneously expanding her own brand. Harry, protective and emotionally grounded in his mother's memory, saw it as an act of selfishness, a violation of trust, and a betrayal that cut deep. The tension here is almost cinematic. Two intelligent, capable individuals operating from completely different value systems, confronting a single point of collision. One sees opportunity, the other sees desecration. One sees strategy, the other sees heartbreak. Adding to the drama, insiders describe moments of confrontation between the two. Harry reportedly demanded answers, seeking to understand why this idea had been pursued without discussion. Meghan's responses, while reportedly calm and professional, did little to assuage his anger. Friends described the exchanges as explosive but contained, conversations that were intense, emotionally charged, and ultimately unresolved. The estate, once a place of comfort and privacy, became a pressure cooker of unspoken resentment and escalating tension. As the alleged details of the trademark plan began to surface, so did questions about execution. Which attorneys were involved? How far had the paperwork progressed? Could it be stopped before becoming public? Sources hint at layers of complexity, multiple drafts, contingency plans, and legal strategies that would have ensured the line could launch regardless of public opinion. Each revelation fueled Harry's sense of urgency, frustration, and betrayal, creating an emotional landscape that was both volatile and deeply personal. Social media and media outlets only amplified the stakes. Though the trademark was not yet public knowledge, early leaks, insider commentary, and speculative reporting fueled an atmosphere of suspense and outrage. Fans, critics, and observers dissected every possible angle. Was it a tribute? A tribute gone wrong? Or was it a calculated act of self-promotion at the expense of legacy and memory? Every interpretation added tension, every post amplified the emotional stakes, and every rumor heightened the sense that Montecito was no longer a sanctuary. It was a stage for a drama the world could not ignore. The alleged trademark also raises questions about public perception versus private intent. Could Meghan have truly intended this as a tribute? Could Harry's anger, intense as it was, be colored by grief, protectiveness, and the raw wound left by losing his mother? These are not easy questions to answer, and the tension between intention and perception adds another layer of complexity to an already fraught narrative. What may have seemed like a business decision on one side was experienced as a deeply personal betrayal on the other, a collision of worlds, emotions, and values. The drama within Montecito reached new heights as Harry reportedly began to distance himself emotionally and physically. Walks alone along the gardens, dinners eaten in silence, and conversations avoided entirely became the new norm. Friends describe an almost palpable tension in the air, as if the estate itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. Staff noticed the shift immediately. Closed doors, hushed voices, and the quiet hum of unease replaced laughter and easy conversation. Every corner of Montecito seemed charged with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved conflict. And then, just when it seemed the tension couldn't escalate further, a new twist emerged. According to insiders, documents related to the alleged trademark began circulating more widely within the inner circle. Copies shared with lawyers, branding consultants, and advisors. The implications were staggering. Harry's fury intensified, friends say, not just at the alleged plan itself, but at the realization that the stakes had grown exponentially. This was no longer a hypothetical scenario or a quiet disagreement. The alleged trademark had become a flashpoint with legal, emotional, and social consequences that could ripple far beyond Montecito. But what came next would change everything, and no one could have anticipated the full scope of the fallout. The confrontation was inevitable. In every story of betrayal, there comes a moment when tension can no longer be contained, when words must be exchanged, truths must be laid bare, and emotions, raw and unfiltered, take center stage. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, that moment arrived at Montecito in a scene that insiders describe as electric, emotional, and, above all, irreversibly defining. Harry had spent days processing the alleged news, replaying every scenario, imagining every possible justification Meghan might offer. But the more he reflected, the less he could reconcile the idea of his mother's name being commercialized with his sense of loyalty and reverence for her memory. Friends say he was a storm contained within human form. Silent in public, seething in private, pacing the manicured gardens of the estate, and waiting for the moment when confrontation became unavoidable. The trigger came quietly, but unmistakably. Harry reportedly discovered tangible evidence of Meghan's alleged trademark plan. Draft documents circulated among legal advisors, branding proposals, and notes outlining the potential fashion line. For a man who has spent his life protecting his mother's legacy, the sight was unbearable. Each page represented, in his eyes, a breach of trust, an affront to memory, and an act that could not be ignored. Sources describe the confrontation as happening in a private study at the Montecito estate, a room lined with books, family photos, and mementos of Diana. The symbolism was palpable. Surrounded by his mother's presence, Harry demanded answers. His voice, usually controlled and measured, reportedly carried a rare edge of anger and disbelief. "How could you even think of doing this?" he allegedly asked. "This isn't just a business move, it's my mother's name. It's her legacy. You can't just turn her into a brand." Meghan's response, according to insiders, was calm but firm, highlighting strategy, branding, and the potential to honor Diana in a modern, creative way. She allegedly emphasized that the line would celebrate Diana's style, her elegance, and her influence on fashion. But calm words were like salt on a wound for Harry. The explanation, rational in a business sense, did little to alleviate the emotional weight. It was the clash between ambition and legacy, strategy and morality, that made the exchange so combustible. What made the confrontation even more intense was the personal history between the two. Their marriage, publicly viewed as a partnership of equals, had private dynamics marked by both deep affection and underlying tension. Harry, protective of his family, and Meghan, ambitious in business, were navigating not only their relationship, but the constant glare of public scrutiny. The alleged trademark issue became a lens through which every prior disagreement, every misaligned expectation, and every emotional wound was magnified. Friends reported that it was not just about a single act. It was the culmination of months of tension simmering beneath the surface, now brought explosively to light. The emotional intensity of the confrontation, sources say, was extraordinary. Harry reportedly felt a combination of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. Meghan, aware of his emotional state, maintained her composure, but insiders described moments where frustration, tension, and unspoken resentment filled the room. The clash was not physical, but emotionally it was a battlefield. Each word, each gesture, each pause carried the weight of history, memory, and personal conviction. As the conversation escalated, the surrounding environment seemed almost to mirror the tension. Outside, the Montecito gardens swayed gently in the breeze. The Pacific Ocean hummed in the distance, serene and indifferent. Inside, every shadow, every photograph, every artifact of Diana's life seemed to amplify the emotional stakes. Friends who later reflected on the scene described it as surreal. Two individuals, one room, an empire of emotion and ambition colliding against the backdrop of a life that had once seemed idyllic. The stakes were not merely emotional, they were deeply symbolic. For Harry, the confrontation was about protecting Diana's legacy from commercialization. For Meghan, it was about expanding influence, shaping a brand, and asserting agency in a world that constantly scrutinizes her every move. The collision of these perspectives created a tension that insiders say was almost unbearable to witness. Every statement carried implications beyond the immediate disagreement, touching on trust, reputation, public perception, and the potential fallout in both royal and celebrity spheres. Sources suggest that the argument reached a peak intensity when Harry, overwhelmed by emotion, made a decision that would alter the course of their lives. He left the room, leaving Meghan and the estate behind. The silence that followed was heavy, almost tangible, as if the air itself was aware of the fracture that had just occurred. Friends reported that Harry did not return for hours, a withdrawal that underscored the depth of his emotional response. This moment, insiders say, was pivotal. It was not just a dispute over a business decision. It was a collision of values, love, grief, and loyalty. Harry reportedly confided to close friends that he felt blindsided, that the act of using Diana's name without discussion represented a betrayal he could scarcely comprehend. And while Meghan's intentions, according to some insiders, may have been strategic or even honoring in intent, the perception of betrayal was irrevocable. What makes the confrontation even more compelling is its aftermath. Harry's absence from Montecito after this pivotal argument marked a turning point in their relationship and the dynamics of the estate. Friends report that the couple's communication became strained, interactions became tense and transactional, and the usual warmth of domestic life was replaced with a fragile equilibrium, always teetering on the edge of further conflict. The estate itself seemed to become a witness to the fracture, every corridor and hallway echoing with unspoken questions, unresolved emotions, and the weight of trust broken. The confrontation also sent shockwaves beyond the walls of Montecito. Close friends and advisors were pulled into the narrative, each offering counsel, perspective, or attempts at mediation. Social media, once quiet observers, began to amplify every leak, rumor, and insider account, magnifying the intensity of the story and ensuring that what began as a private dispute quickly became a global point of intrigue. Questions raced across platforms. Would Harry forgive Meghan? Could the alleged trademark move be reversed? What would the public think if this became widely known? The stakes were enormous, the implications profound, and the drama irresistible. In many ways, this confrontation was not just about business or legacy. It was about identity, morality, and love tested by betrayal. Harry, grappling with grief and protective instincts, was forced to navigate a situation where personal values collided with marital partnership, ambition, and public expectation. Meghan, ambitious and media-savvy, faced the challenge of balancing her own aspirations with the emotional realities of her husband's grief and perspective. The result, insiders say, was a confrontation charged with emotion, symbolism, and high stakes, the kind of moment that defines relationships, legacies, and public perception. Friends who witnessed the emotional aftermath describe Harry's decision to leave Montecito as both decisive and symbolic. It was a physical act that mirrored his internal state: anger, disappointment, and the need for distance. The estate, once a sanctuary of calm and domestic life, had transformed into a theater of unresolved tension, where every interaction carried the potential for further escalation. The confrontation, while private, set in motion a series of events that would ripple through their personal lives, professional ventures, and public perception. And yet, as dramatic as the confrontation was, insiders suggest it was only the beginning. The real fallout, the decisions made in the wake of this explosive exchange, and the choices Harry would make following his departure from Montecito were what truly shaped the narrative. This was more than a disagreement. It was the opening act of a saga of betrayal, loyalty, ambition, and emotional intensity, one that would grip audiences worldwide. But what came next would change everything, and no one anticipated the full scale of the consequences. Harry left Montecito without a word. No dramatic announcement, no posted statement, no televised reveal. He simply vanished. To anyone outside the estate, it may have seemed sudden, even inexplicable. But those closest to him say it was the culmination of weeks, no, months, of emotional pressure, tension, and an ever-growing sense of betrayal. The alleged trademark of Princess Diana's name for a luxury fashion line had crossed a line Harry could not ignore. It wasn't just a business move. It was, in his eyes, a moral violation, a personal affront that demanded an immediate response. The day of his departure began like any other. Early morning light spilled over the Montecito estate, the ocean sparkling beyond the manicured lawns. Birds chirped in the garden, and a soft breeze rustled the hedges. Inside, the estate hummed with activity, staff preparing breakfast, security checking schedules, and Meghan reportedly reviewing documents with her team. But beneath the ordinary rhythm of the morning, the undercurrent of tension was palpable. Harry had spent hours reflecting, pacing the halls, revisiting every conversation, every email, every whisper of the alleged plan. The realization had settled into him with the weight of inevitability. He could not stay. Sources close to the couple described the moment as both deliberate and emotional. Harry reportedly packed his essentials quickly, choosing not to engage in further debate or confrontation. Friends say he didn't leave in anger alone. He left in a mix of heartbreak, disbelief, and determination. He needed distance, both physical and emotional, to process the betrayal, to protect himself from further emotional harm, and to figure out his next steps. The Montecito estate, once a symbol of refuge and new beginnings, had transformed into a space charged with conflict and disappointment. Staff members, who had grown accustomed to Harry's calm and composed demeanor, were reportedly stunned. One insider shared that the usually quiet but reliable prince suddenly became a whirlwind of movement, issuing minimal instructions, eyes blazing with intensity. There was no outburst, no shouting, just a determined focus that made it clear something monumental had shifted. Meghan's team, still engrossed in planning, reportedly sensed the tension but did not fully understand its magnitude. It was as if a storm had arrived quietly, then erupted with uncontainable force. Harry's departure wasn't just a physical act, it was deeply symbolic. In leaving the estate, he was signaling a boundary, asserting a limit that had been crossed. The act conveyed anger, disappointment, and a profound sense of personal violation. Friends report that his absence was felt immediately throughout Montecito. Conversations grew tense, staff movements became quieter, and a heavy sense of unease settled over the estate. Every hallway, every garden path, every common area seemed to resonate with the weight of his absence. The media, as it so often does, picked up on the absence almost immediately. Social media posts speculating about Harry's whereabouts began to circulate within hours. Fans, commentators, and journalists alike speculated endlessly. Had he gone on a retreat? Was this a prelude to a major announcement? Or was it, as some insiders suggested, the emotional response to a betrayal too deep to ignore? The speculation only fueled the drama, amplifying the tension and ensuring that the narrative was now public, even if the details of the alleged betrayal remained behind closed doors. Friends who attempted to reach Harry reported mixed responses. Some were met with silence, others with terse messages indicating he needed time alone. It was clear that he was processing something far larger than a typical disagreement. The alleged trademark attempt was not merely an inconvenience. It was, to Harry, a profound emotional violation. By leaving Montecito, he created both literal and figurative space to consider his next moves, free from the immediate pressure of confrontation or public scrutiny. But the impact of his departure was felt most acutely by those left behind. Meghan, focused on her business endeavors, reportedly continued her planning, but the emotional tone of the estate had irrevocably shifted. Sources suggest that private conversations became shorter, meetings more formal, and moments of levity almost non-existent. The dynamics of the household, once collaborative and affectionate, became strained and tense. Montecito itself seemed transformed, no longer just a sanctuary but a stage for unresolved conflict and lingering emotional fallout. Legal advisors and branding consultants also became part of the unfolding drama. Questions emerged. How far had the trademark process progressed? Could it be halted? What were the potential implications for Harry, for Meghan, and for Diana's legacy? Each question added another layer of stress and urgency. Friends describe Harry as deeply engaged even in his absence, consulting legal teams, weighing options, and preparing for the potential consequences of the alleged trademark. His departure was not an escape. It was a strategic pause, a moment to collect his thoughts and plan his next steps. The public reaction, too, was intense. News outlets immediately highlighted the absence, painting a narrative of royal scandal meets Hollywood intrigue. Social media erupted with theories, arguments, and debates. The story had everything: family betrayal, business ambition, emotional drama, and the shadow of a beloved public figure whose memory was being called into question. Every headline, every post, every tweet served to heighten the stakes, creating a feedback loop of tension that would continue for days, weeks, and potentially months. Friends and insiders described the scene outside Montecito as equally charged. Neighbors, accustomed to the couple's presence, noticed the sudden quiet, the absence of Harry's morning walks, and the subtle changes in the atmosphere around the estate. Rumors began to spread, both within social circles and across the broader media landscape. Harry's departure, while private, had immediate and far-reaching consequences, signaling both personal turmoil and a shift in the couple's dynamic that would not go unnoticed. Emotionally, Harry's exit marked a turning point. It was a declaration, an assertion, and a boundary-setting act, all in one. By leaving Montecito, he underscored the seriousness of the alleged betrayal and the depth of his emotional response. It was not an impulsive act of anger alone. It was informed by grief, loyalty, and a protective instinct that had been honed over decades. Friends note that this decision, while difficult, was essential for his emotional well-being and for his ability to navigate the complex personal and public implications of the situation. And yet, even as Harry left the estate, the story was far from over. Meghan's alleged trademark plans, the emotional fallout, and the public scrutiny were only the beginning. What followed would involve not just personal reconciliation or conflict, but legal considerations, public relations challenges, and further emotional upheaval. The departure from Montecito was a dramatic moment, but it was also a catalyst for a series of events that would redefine their relationship, their public image, and the narrative surrounding Diana's legacy. But what came next would change everything, and the world would soon see just how explosive this drama could become. The world knew almost immediately. Once Prince Harry's departure from Montecito became visible, even subtly, the ripple effects were instantaneous, unstoppable, and global. Social media exploded. Every news outlet, from gossip columns to international tabloids, scrambled to report on the prince's absence, each attempting to piece together what insiders whispered behind closed doors. The alleged trademark of Princess Diana's name for a luxury fashion line became the focal point of speculation, criticism, and debate. And for Harry, what had begun as a private confrontation now felt like it was under the harsh glare of the world stage. The media storm was fueled by the perfect combination of public fascination and raw emotion. Harry, the grieving son of Diana, suddenly in conflict over what appeared to be a commercial exploitation of her memory. Meghan, ambitious, calculating, and media-savvy, allegedly pushing forward with her plans despite her husband's outrage. It was irresistible. Headlines were immediate, sensational, and often contradictory. Some framed Meghan as ruthless, others as misunderstood, and some painted Harry as emotionally overwhelmed, struggling to reconcile loyalty and love. Social media amplified every angle, with hashtags trending within hours and celebrity commentators weighing in with provocative opinions. The speed and scale of the coverage left insiders stunned. For friends and staff around Montecito, the storm was surreal. Private conversations, once confidential and shielded from the outside world, were suddenly dissected in online forums, fan communities, and high-profile entertainment segments. Every leaked document, every rumored whisper of a legal consultation, became fodder for analysis and judgment. Even casual mentions of Harry walking along the estate's gardens or Meghan meeting with branding consultants were amplified, interpreted, and spun into narratives that often ignored nuance, context, or personal intent. Friends reported that Harry himself was aware of the coverage but tried to shield himself from the immediacy of the outrage, focusing instead on processing the emotional core of the situation. Public reaction was equally polarized. On one hand, diehard fans of Harry expressed empathy, describing his reaction as natural, necessary, and deeply human. To them, Meghan's alleged actions were more than a business misstep. They were a betrayal of trust, a violation of memory, a disregard for legacy. On the other hand, supporters of Meghan argued that intentions mattered. Was the alleged trademark a misguided attempt at honoring Diana, rather than exploiting her name? Did Harry's reaction, fueled by grief and protective instincts, overshadow strategic considerations or practical business decisions? Every perspective added complexity to the story, creating a narrative web that was impossible to untangle fully. The immediacy of social media intensified the stakes. Memes, viral posts, and hashtags circulated at lightning speed, each contributing to the public's perception of the drama. Comments ranged from sympathetic to critical, from analytical to purely speculative. Celebrities, influencers, and commentators joined the fray, offering opinions that ranged from legal analysis to moral judgment. Every mention, retweet, or discussion thread served to escalate tension and reinforce the sense that Montecito was no longer a private sanctuary. It had become a global stage for scrutiny and debate. For Harry, the media storm was a double-edged sword. On one side, it amplified the seriousness of the perceived betrayal, signaling to Meghan and her advisors the depth of his emotional reaction. On the other, it created external pressure, complicating what had been an intensely personal conflict. Friends describe him as navigating a complex balance, protecting his mother's legacy, managing his own emotions, and mitigating the impact of public perception, all while processing the shock of alleged betrayal. The stakes were enormous, and every action or inaction carried consequences that extended far beyond Montecito's walls. The storm also drew legal and branding experts into the narrative. Commentary ranged from discussions about trademark law to debates about the ethical implications of using a deceased public figure's name. Experts weighed in, explaining how such a trademark could be filed, contested, or potentially challenged by heirs or estate representatives. Some highlighted the unprecedented nature of the situation, pointing out that while celebrity brands often capitalize on personal names, using a deceased loved one's identity, especially one as globally revered as Diana's, crossed ethical and emotional boundaries. The complexity of the legal landscape added yet another layer to the unfolding drama. Friends close to Harry noted that the intensity of the coverage created an almost surreal environment. It wasn't just the external attention, it was how that attention reflected, magnified, and reframed the emotional core of the conflict. Every leak, every social media post, every headline reframed the confrontation in a public lens, often omitting context or nuance. Friends described moments where Harry would read an article, pause, and exhale deeply, feeling both validation and frustration simultaneously. The story had escaped the walls of Montecito and entered a world in which emotion, rumor, and interpretation collided with relentless intensity. The public reaction also revealed a cultural fascination with legacy, loyalty, and celebrity. Audiences were captivated not just by the alleged betrayal, but by the emotional stakes, the personal history, and the moral questions embedded in the narrative. Could a business move be reconciled with love and respect for family? How do we navigate ambition when it intersects with deeply held emotional boundaries? These questions resonated with viewers worldwide, creating a sense of engagement, empathy, and intrigue that social media amplified exponentially.